Okay, we're on the air. Okay, we're going.
Oh, I missed it.
Okay, we're going. Okay.
We're live.
Good morning. It is now 10 o'clock on Tuesday, April 18th. This is special Public Safety Committee meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that the press and the public have been duly notified of the meeting in accordance with the Freedom of Information Act. Next item on the agenda is citizens' comments. Nicole, do we have any?
Yes, sir. Julie Nestler is first.
Okay. Julie, just give us your name and address, please. And comments are 3 minutes.
Okay, yeah, I just have a quick list. Julie Nestler, 22nd Avenue. This is just my attempt, helping to provide solutions and just making a request of consideration because I've had many people call, heard complaints and confusion about what happened. So, number one, just consideration. Have an alert and a notification procedure in place, similar to an Amber Alert, that the city can be able to push out real-time information so citizens and businesses are aware and can stay out of harm's way. It can also be utilized for severe weather reports. Number two, it is vital that the city administration be consistent with information to the public with what police and fire have said. For example, Mayor Pounds, in his close-up with Quentin, said that they received information 24 to 48 hours before the incident, whereas Chief Cornett and the county sheriff were informed Friday morning. So I think it just causes the community to have much confusion as to what really happened. I implore city council and city administration to get trained in emergency management. I think it would be helpful. And lastly, I encourage you to listen to public safety officials and support what they need to do their job, especially and including selecting the configuration of the bridge that suits public safety over convenience. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else, Nicole?
Miss Mimi Wood is next.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm Mimi Wood, 3100 Waterway Boulevard. I just want to say real quickly, I think we're all working towards the same goal, and I think there's so many good ideas from people a lot smarter than I am. And where my frustration lies is I don't think people are listening to each other very well, and I think people are not considering the source, or they're considering the source of the idea rather than the idea. So an example on my own behalf was I saw that letter that Beach Association or whoever put out that said they wanted to open up the avenues. And I was like, absolutely not, because I saw who it was from. And then when I started thinking about it, I'm like, it's worth consideration if we open them up like from Hartnett to Waterway, because it would, probably people aren't going to walk that far. They might a little bit, but that's what they do on Sullivan's. And B, it would be easier to monitor. Like, I know when somebody parks on my property, I'm like, who is it? I just watch. It's like a neighborhood watch thing. So whatever. That's just an example of me, though, saying, oh, I'm not going to listen to that, and then, thinking it over because of the source. So I'm just asking. I'm not even asking council. I thought that this place would be packed. I want to ask my fellow citizens or neighbors to place principles before personalities, like listen to the idea rather than considering who it came from and judging it that way. I think we're all working towards the same goal, and I think we will more easily accomplish that goal and more gracefully accomplish that goal if we're willing to listen to each other. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else, Nicole?
Mr. Vega,
Mr. Vega?
didn't you say you want to talk today?
No, the previous meeting.
I knew that, but you'd said you'd see us, so I just thought
Oh,
that
no,
meant
no.
you just don't want to talk. Okay, then we're done.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Next, the purpose of this meeting is a discussion of the incident at the beach on Friday, April 7th, 2023. And the recommendation is to prevent a situation from occurring like this in the future. And I'd like to turn it over to Chief Cornett at this point.
Yes, sir. Are you wanting a walkthrough of what took place on April 7th and then recommendations, or?
I think, I don't know how the other committee members feel, but I think I would just like a brief overview about when we were notified of when, all this was coming down and is there any intelligence that would indicate that they were coming? And more importantly, is what is our plan for the future to deter this type of behavior? I understand there was some talk of some people coming over this past Friday, but it kind of shut down pretty easily up at around 25th Avenue and 32nd, I believe. But I think the citizens, I just called this for the citizens because they would like to hear it from law enforcement agencies about what we knew, if anything, beforehand, and just walk through recommendations that you would have for the future.
Okay, I can do that.
Mr. Chair, could we ask for a timeline first to get it on the record accurately for our
I
public?
think that's pretty much what I asked for.
Okay.
But that's fine.
Yeah,
As far as the incident goes, we were notified Friday morning when a parent called the police department after they sent their kids to school, indicating that they didn't want to tell their child they couldn't go, but felt the need to notify law enforcement because they were concerned. So we found out Friday morning. We did not know how many high schools were coming. We did not have any information about what high schools were going to be involved, who were not going to be involved. As soon as we got the notification, we reached out to our partners over at Charleston County Sheriff's Office and requested assistance, which they did send. They sent traffic units and K-9 officers over here to assist. And we also reached out to our partners over at Mount Pleasant. I think some of the things that I've kind of heard and seen going around, I can kind of clarify a lot of the questions. I've seen questions related to why we didn't activate the National Guard, and that would be something that the governor himself has the authority to do. I do not. And then we cannot require other agencies to send us so many other people, especially on short notice. When they have personnel that they've already got assigned places, a short notice thing is typically not going to give us the response that we would have when we can plan. As if we look at Thursday, this past Thursday, the plan was for a group to go to Folly Beach. We've learned from previous years that when a plan is to go to another location and there's a heavy law enforcement presence, that they will shift their location prior to going, and we tend to be one of those locations that they would come to. So we adjusted our personnel and planned for Thursday last week, and that's why we had so many personnel, law enforcement, and closed the lots on that day, was to prevent any incident from shifting from that location to our location as it had in the past. As far as April 7th goes, the crowd gathered on the beach. I actually made the first arrest with the group at 2:30 in the afternoon. And we continued to arrest individuals throughout the afternoon who were involved in criminal activity. For the most part, kids on the beach were doing legal things. They were gathering, they were playing football drills and things like that. However, a fight broke out, and then a second fight broke out while officers were detaining those. And around 5:29 or 5:27, we had shots fired on the beach. Immediately, officers had the individuals that were already in handcuffs. They got them to safe locations. Other officers then charged towards where the gunfire was taking place in an attempt to stop that gunfire. It ceased. The threat was no longer active, and they started rendering aid to individuals that had been injured during the shooting. The crowds typically leave and go to the parking lots, and then sometimes they will move to the Circle K parking lot. So our responding agencies, after we called for other agencies due to the shooting, they responded to the gas station parking lot and to our municipal parking lots, where they were able to help individuals leave and to deter other incidents from happening, and take 2 other individuals with firearms into custody, one in the parking lot and one on Ocean Boulevard, one being a juvenile who was in possession of a stolen firearm, and one being an 18-year-old who was in possession of a firearm. They were both arrested. It was great to see the officers' response when the incident took place and how they immediately charged towards the gunfire to protect individuals and then rendered aid. Within moments, they were able to get individuals loaded into their Polaris and off of the beach into the care of the firefighters who had met us on 14th Avenue. We had already called for assistance prior to the shooting. we'd actually call for more officers to come just so that we could shut the event down. And after we had called for that assistance, which would have been in excess to what we already had on the beach. We already had deputies, we already had about 50% of our agency on the beach. And then we called for more, and then the shooting took place, and that expedited response from more agencies to come to assist us. And within a short period of time, we had a large law enforcement presence on the island to secure the area, secure the crime scene, work the crime scene, conduct interviews, take individuals into custody. And most of those officers, I think 2 o'clock in the morning is when we left with some of those agencies that were still assisting us, stayed until about 2 o'clock in the morning, working with us on those things.
Has there been an arrest made, like a shooter?
There has not been an arrest made for the individual that did the shooting. It is an active and fluid investigation, and we are following multiple leads. I can't give a whole bunch of detail, but I will say it is active. It is
Okay.
not stale. We are moving forward with an investigation.
Well, I appreciate that. Just to follow up on your report there, so your recommendations for the future are pretty much, or I don't want to put words in your mouth, but how you handled it the last time?
Yes and no. Obviously, anytime we have an opportunity to plan, we already know that there is an event planned for May 6th to come out here again. And so we are already in the planning phases, reaching out to our local agencies to assist us. And when we have that type of heads up, it gives us the opportunity to have a much better presence here because it's not a short period of time and they can dedicate resources to us. One thing that I want to make sure that we point out is there's been a lot of talk about how many officers were on the beach. We only have, when we're fully staffed and fully geared up, 22 sworn police officers. And that includes me, that includes all the administrative staff, that includes detectives. And we had one vacancy the day of the event. I have one on light duty. I have 3 in FTO on that day. So our numbers were already quite short. And I had 50% of the available workforce as far as sworn police officers on the beach, as well as myself and other sworn personnel in the parking lots. So something to keep in mind is that we are not a large agency. Yet during the summer, we can see 30,000 people on this beach, on this island easily. And so it's something to keep in mind is that we're already severely outnumbered when it comes to law enforcement. Some of the things we're looking for, recommendations, would be to look at some of our neighboring beach cities and some of the ordinances they have where they require permits for large groups. I think if we did that, that would give us an avenue to close these groups down and shut them down, unless they're doing so lawfully with a permit from the city to do that. Folly Beach has one, Sullivan's Island has one. I believe Mount Pleasant even has a ordinance that pertains to it. I believe Horry County and some of those beach communities that way also have these ordinances. So that's not something that we would be the first to do. It's already there. We would be one of the few that don't have it right now. Some of the other things that we would look at would be our drone program. We have a great drone program. The problem is that our drones are operated by our sworn personnel who are on the beach and have their hands full and unable to fly those drones. So we've presented a drone with a helipad, which would be a system that is it's seated on the top of the public safety building and can be flown from a desktop with some of our personnel that are non-sworn. It gives the ability to get that overhead view. And it is something that not just for incidents like this, but any incident, including fire incidents, would be a benefit. We've both talked about how beneficial that would be for both of our departments. And so that would be a recommendation we're making. A transport van would be something that our personnel have asked for. Right now, if we have multiple people going to jail, that means multiple officers have to leave the island and drive all the way to Leeds Avenue to book individuals into the jail. A transport van would give us the ability to do that with less personnel gone to the jail. Another thing that we talked about last year after our Memorial Day event was I was a big advocate for our FBI task force that is in the Low Country. They played a crucial role in response on April 7th. We had both the FBI Violent Crimes Task Force and the Joint Terrorism Task Force that came out here. All these responses have a lot to do with the partnerships that we have worked hard to build prior to this incident. But this is something I recommended last year, was that we assign an officer to this task force, to one of these task force. We've actually worked with them, and I think there's a way that we can assign an officer to their task force, duplicating the personnel that we have available, but we've worked it out to where during the busy season, they would be here and only respond to major incidents, and during the off-season, they would spend majority of their time working with that task force, kind of an assistance for them and assistance for us. And those task force come with analysts too, that could be very beneficial for us in gathering information about future events. We would like to look at a K-9 program. It's not new to the Isle of Palms Police Department. Years ago, they had a K-9 program. But what we saw on April 7th was the effectiveness of the K-9 program. Officers from K-9 helped us to do article sweeps on the beach to find items. They helped us to find other guns that might be out there. So a K-9 program would be very beneficial. We're requesting a surveillance tower. It's a tow-behind tower. You've seen them at these big events. It's one of those things that goes really high, and you've got windows on it, or it can just have cameras on it. It could be used for front beach festivals, used for any big event that we're doing. It's simply towed out, dropped off, and it raises up, and it gives a bird's eye view over everything. Just more information to get. Building on that, adding cameras. One thing that we've learned through this is that as many cameras as we have, there were a lot of blind spots that would be beneficial to be picked up by cameras. And so we would recommend adding some to beach access paths, additional to Ocean Boulevard to cover the blind spots that we found during this incident, and maybe the entrances and exits of the parking lot, as well as the license plate reader that is already in the budget for next year that will go on the Isle of Palms connector. That would be something different from these cameras. And then the only other thing that we've kind of talked about with Desiree that's a bigger ticket item would be we have one officer that is already an EMT basic certified, and we have several other officers that I think would be able to take that certification and use that. They were able to, I had an officer packing a wound, a bullet wound with gauze. I had officers putting direct pressure on bullet wounds and wrapping individuals. I think if we were to seek that EMT basic certification, because there's certain times when the area is not necessarily deemed safe where fire department's going to feel comfortable coming because they don't have the ballistic vest and the things that we do at all times to protect them, or the training that we do in those environments. That sometimes that certification would be beneficial for our officers to be able to render aid until we can get them to that safe location to the fire department so that they can take care of them.
Would you consider putting some dollar figures on these requests? I was listening closely, and I thought there were some great ideas. It's not too late to
Yes,
get
sir.
it, to consider it for this year's budget coming up.
Perfect. Yes, sir. I've got them gathering that information right now.
Okay, very good. I'd appreciate that if you get that to Desiree and Debbie. One last comment, now I'll let the other members have, I know they have some things to say, but, we're looking at this parking program from an independent vendor, and if that comes to fruition, then the beach service officers would be free to do what their title says, beach service officer, correct? And they would be down on the beach. They would have been of tremendous help, I would think, on April 7th and in the future. Do you agree with that?
Yes, sir. I think what we look at with our BSOs, when they're actually on the beach, that's our face of the city. That's what most of our visitors are going to encounter first, is a beach service officer who can help. Maybe on the 7th, what we did with our beach service officer, because they're not trained for those events, we did send our beach service officer that's currently here to the public safety building until it was safe. And then they played an integral role in helping to direct traffic and bring resources to personnel who were working crime scenes. But it would be something great for them to be out there and help with holes on the beach, those alcohol violations, and those smoking on the beach, littering on the beach. I think if we outsource parking, BSOs on the beach play a big part to helping us with those issues that arise. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Y'all, I'm sure y'all have some questions or comments. Go ahead.
Okay. The first one that I'm really interested in is the amount of coordination that appears to be among all of the agencies and jurisdictions within the Tri-County area. And just to let you know, I was at the Council of Governments meeting yesterday where all of these jurisdictions sit together. And I personally thank them for their response for us, because they took a dangerous situation and helped us manage it so that it didn't go out of control. And I thought that was really important. But I have no idea about behind the scenes. You must have been doing this on a regular basis for a long time. Can you tell us about the meetings and coordination that you have with the other jurisdictions?
Yes, ma'am. I strongly believe that law enforcement is no longer able to be just jurisdictionally. Our bad guys are Mount Pleasant's bad guys. They're Sullivan's Island bad guys. They're bad guys for North Charleston. Sometimes they're bad guys for other states. I've learned throughout my career that we are only successful when we build those relationships so that we can work together, because at the end of the day, we all have a common goal of making our community safer. And so we've begun doing breakfasts. We call it the Tri-Counties Law Enforcement Leader Breakfast. It's more of a brunch, but all the Tri-County law enforcement leaders gather, and that's from your colleges, it's from your sheriff's offices, your police departments, and we actually started that back in June of, I think it was last year. Isle of Palm started that back up out here, actually. And also part of that would be, like Captain Swain just graduated from the FBI National Academy. I'm deeply involved in the FBI National Academy Association chapter of South Carolina, and that's law enforcement agencies from all over the state, both local, state, and federal agencies, all of which either responded or offered to send personnel. We had people from Colombia that were offering to send personnel, and we had to tell them, hold on, we're kind of full right now. But those relationships and that time that we build in that are very important, because at the end of the day, we see how useful it is. And when Somerville had issues and protests back in 2020 and 2021, Isle of Palm sent personnel to assist Somerville because that's just what we do. We help one another. We also sent personnel into Mount Pleasant to assist when they went into Charleston to help them. We sent personnel to assist them so that they could get coverage. That's the only way law enforcement's ever going to be successful in accomplishing our overall goal of safety, is to build those relationships.
And how do you coordinate all of this? Is there a central control center or something that you can get the word out to everyone, or is it individual to each agency, or how does that work?
We use dispatch, and when we called for assistance from dispatch, they put it out to other agencies, and when I said I needed more, they reached out further and got us additional. Some would call, but most of them just through dispatch were deployed.
Okay.
Good. Yeah, Blair?
Done?
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chief. First thing I want to do is just say that on April 13th, last Thursday, everybody did just a fabulous job. I witnessed leaving the connector. There were 3 police cars lined up on the Mount Pleasant side with the officers standing beside the cars, waving to people as they were going onto the island. And it's my understanding, I think I saw one, it's my understanding there were multiple cars full of potential bad guys that were doing U-turns and leaving because they saw that show of force. So thank you very much for that and that coordinated effort. Yes, I assume that you're planning something similar for the May proposed meeting, May 6th. I think that something has gone out on social media calling everybody to come here on May 6th.
That's correct, yes, sir. As soon as we got that information, we shared it with our friends over at Charleston County, and they're already promising us personnel. Mount Pleasant is promising us personnel, and we're reaching out to other agencies to get assistance as well. Much like what Folly Beach did for their event, we will have, I'm pretty confident we will have a large show of force for police officers out here.
Good, good. And thank you for that. It was my understanding that in the April event, that there were people coming from over 2 hours away, that it was not just high school students. Is that accurate?
We have heard that. I've not confirmed that, but we have heard that there were people coming from as far as Manning. But again, I've not confirmed that. I've not interviewed anybody or seen an interview where somebody has specifically said that.
3 other quick questions. One is the parking vendor that Mr. Ward mentioned. I'm assuming that's something that you are in favor of.
Absolutely, yes, sir.
Okay. You talked about permitting for groups. Do you have a number of how big a group would need a permit?
When we looked at the other agencies around us, I think the smallest I saw was 10. I've seen some that were 25 and some that were 30 or 40. I think ultimately that would be a decision for council, but I think 30 and 40, talking with Chief Simmons and some of our partners, that's kind of been where we're looking at, that's a manageable number. And once you get past that, it gets a little more difficult to manage.
So you'd be comfortable then if we said over 30, you gotta have a permit?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You'd mentioned a transport van. Is there a possibility of sharing a transport van with either Mount Pleasant or Sullivan's?
I think we could certainly share it with Sullivan's Island. Mount Pleasant has one, and they, on last Thursday, did offer that if we needed it. What you run into is when you have limited resources for it, they might not be available because of mechanic issues or something like that. But I'm all about, let's share resources.
Okay.
It doesn't even have to be mine. It could be theirs.
Right.
As long as we're partners and we share it. I don't care who owns it.
Chief Oliveris, do you have anything that you want to say specifically about what we're talking about?
Well, sure. I want to definitely, thank our police department. They coordinated a really good triage point and treatment point for us. They secured that area. We were very aggressive in our response. From the time of dispatch until when we arrived on scene and began treatment, it was 5 minutes. Actually 6 minutes before we did that. And then EMS, their Delta unit supervisor, Delta 3, one paramedic and an SUV, they were on scene within 1 minute after our firefighters began the treatment and triage that our police department had initiated. So they did a phenomenal job. It can be quite stressful, for our personnel when we're attempting to treat the patients and they're being yelled at and pushed, and officers around them are trying to establish a safe area, and they have, their long weapons drawn, So we train for that in the fire service, but here at Isle of Palms, that's a little new to us, and so we're diligently working toward that. We've identified training opportunities with the police department, and in fact, we were scheduled the week before and that week to go to use the facility to practice active threat, how we respond with our police department. Chief Cornett and I have talked about that as well. So we were very aggressive in our treatment. I couldn't be more proud of our firefighters. They did not wait. They immediately got into the mix. And the reason it took us so long is because we had masses of people that were moving through the roadway, and we just could not make our way through because of just the volume of people that were leaving the beach and across Ocean Boulevard, down Pavilion, and down 14th. So it took us quite a while. Normally it would take, 30 seconds to a minute. But we had, lots of children, lots of adults that were just back and forth across the roadway. And so we had to definitely take our time getting to the patient. But yes, very proud of everybody. We do have a few recommendations. We've already discussed those with Ms. Fregoso. Most of those are, non-budgetary. Ballistic vests would be a budgetary item, for our people because we want to be aggressive in our patient care. So again, I was very, very proud of our group. And to citizens' comments, to Ms. Nestler who spoke, we did reach out to Charleston County Dispatch, and we have that ability to do just what she was mentioning, where we can notify any citizen that has a cell phone in a certain area, whether it's a half mile, a mile radius. We can tell them that over the air. The incident commander can say, send out an alert. We have active threat, for example, 14th and Ocean, shelter in place. Please avoid the area. Police department on scene. And then we can let everybody know when it's clear. Charleston County Dispatch now has that ability, so it goes out similar to a weather alert or an Amber Alert, and we're actively training our battalion chiefs on how to do that. Of course, we have to work with our police department to make sure we don't share information that they would not like shared, but just those really quick facts that people need to know that, hey, we're aware, we're working it, and please avoid the area, and give some basic directions to our folks, and that'll take care of the businesses and the people in that general vicinity. So that's a great piece of technology that we do now have. In the past, it was just typically on a landline. You could do reverse 911, but now Charleston County has purchased some additional pieces that allow us to be more aggressive in that and notifying the public.
and I know y'all have already thought about this, I'm gonna throw it out there, because we have a choke point, I don't know if a mile radius is enough. It might, if we could do it island-wide, so that, for instance, people at Wild Dunes understand something's happening here and on the connector, they know to stay away.
Correct,
Just stay
absolutely.
there.
And we can do 10 miles, we can do, 5 miles, but we can get it down to a quarter-mile radius. They take a polygon and can do different shapes across the island, or any specific geographic area to let people know what's going on. So that will be up to the incident commander based upon what scene they have. And then, for example, that scene, it affected, east of the Cooper as well, because our ambulances have to travel those roadways, and we don't want people coming onto Isle of Palms, that aren't aware. So that would be a very large notification area. What's great about it, we can also do, missing children on the beach. We can do a more targeted area for that, and that goes to everybody's cell phone. So now, instead of just police and fire looking for this individual, we can have a larger group of people. The public can assist us, and that's where the true power lies, is in our great citizens.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Following up with that, we had just authorized establishing a push notification system, I think, with the cities in the budget for this year. Can you tell me how these two are related?
So there would be two different systems. The technology that we have proposed and are planning to implement, if approved in the upcoming budget, would require folks signing up ahead of time and selecting the type of notifications that they would like to receive from the city. So this would be different. I think that for emergency situations like we had in April, the technology that Charleston County Dispatch is offering and is available now would work best, because we would be able to push that information directly to the cell phones, regardless of whether or not they selected to receive it or not, which is
Yeah.
the big difference between the two different technologies. I think we're looking at CityBot as a citizen engagement tool, people to learn about events, more specifically city business. So that would be different. The two would not be duplicating efforts.
Okay, and the emergency notification is available now?
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct. Through
So-
Charleston County, yes, ma'am.
I guess I'm curious about when we're going to get our first notification. Well, I mean, the next incident like this would be able to be broadcast? Because one of the questions was people felt like they didn't know what was going on soon enough, and so might have gotten caught in the middle of it or something like that. So going forward, we have that coverage now?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, excellent. Okay. I've got going back to the situation with paramedics on the police force. I agree that the emergency service needs to be a follow-up for any of this work, but we just authorized in our budget hiring 6 paramedics. So I'm just hoping that you can coordinate between the two departments so that we can get the most effective use of what personnel we have already or are planning to have on this island. I don't want to shortchange us one way or the other. I also want to make sure all of our personnel are as safe as they can be.
Yes, ma'am. We would not take over paramedics. We're looking for the most basic EMT certification that there is. I want to leave all the work for that stuff on these guys. They're really good at that. If something happened to me, this is where I want to be because I trust them that much. We're not trying to be that.
Okay.
We just want to be able to render enough aid until we can get them into the capable hands of our firefighters, who we have seen countless times render aid in a fashion that saves lives. And so we just want to be able to keep them sustained until we can get them into their hands.
Okay.
And we currently have one officer in the police department that is EMT certified. He trains with our fire department. The idea would be to offer that as an option to our officers. If they wanted to get that certification, we can incentivize it by offering an additional step through, a bump in salary, if you will, to encourage that type of training that would assist in what Chief Cornett was mentioning earlier.
Excellent. Excellent. That's great.
Chief, Cornett, would you give us a brief overview of the community meeting this afternoon at 5 o'clock at the rec center?
Yes, so this is a community meeting we already had scheduled way prior to this event. We've done 2 already prior to this, and all it is the community comes in and we give them a breakdown of what their department looks like, and we give them a breakdown of the crime stats in the area that we broke the island down into the areas for zones, which you would be familiar with the old version of the reports. We break it down by those zones, and we just give them their stats on what types of basic crimes took place in their area, just so they have an idea of what their community's like in their little slice of heaven.
Okay. Several years ago, the entire Alabama City Council took a field trip to Charleston County Dispatch, and we spent pretty much a whole day up there. And I would encourage, at minimum, the Public Safety Committee members and hopefully the entire council would call up there, try to make an appointment. I'm sure they'd be welcome to see you. And it'd be very helpful, informative, and it will increase your knowledge level about what really happens. It's way up there, off, almost in Somerville, I believe. But it was a very interesting trip. So I'd encourage you to make that effort. Yes, yes,
Can I
ma'am.
piggyback off of that real quick?
Yeah.
I've given kudos to the fire department. They've been fantastic, and I'm very proud of our team, but I cannot leave out 911 dispatch. They played a critical role. They were calm. They got us into an incident channel and helped us to navigate that thing. So I'm glad you brought that up, and I just want to be on public record saying they did a phenomenal job working through that event with us.
Yeah, if anybody thinks that their job is stressful, they ought to go sit in those seats of those fine people. There's a lot of young people up there. That's the point of first contact. You talk about stress.
Yes, sir. And no closure. They rarely get closure on what took place.
Right, yeah. Any other comments? Yes.
To change this topic completely, of course, to the one I'm best at, and that is traffic control. I just would like to know what kind of coordination you have, whether you have a leadership person that always looks at that when there is a situation on the island, and what we have with coordinating with Mount Pleasant during this past incident in the future in terms of clearing the island of traffic.
We actually had personnel. I know it didn't feel like it on Friday.
Yeah, well.
But Mount Pleasant did have personnel moving traffic through Rifle Range, Hungry Neck, and all the way up to 17. There was just a lot of people leaving. So we typically, once we get this part sustained and there's no longer a safety threat here, as far as we can tell, then we will move to, let's divert some of our officers that are here to alleviating that pressure of the island. And that's what we did. It was just so many vehicles trying to leave at one time that it was, the traffic was heavy. But Mount Pleasant is always a partner of ours. We talk to their traffic captain on every busy Saturday and Sunday. The Captain Carter is out here helping us to get that traffic moving. I feel like he's an integral part of our team.
Okay, well, every summer weekend that we have a 3 o'clock thunderstorm, you can practice, that's for sure, because that's when everybody leaves the island at the same time. I'm glad to hear that's in place because it is important.
Chief Arnold gives us about every resource he can to help us and Sullivan's Island on these busy weekends. It's almost like we're just one big department. The three of us are really close.
I'd just like to thank everybody involved, from staff and the two chiefs, to meeting with us this morning. I called this meeting because I felt like people were very interested. That communication is the key in my mind, and I just really appreciate your report. Any further comments or questions? Yes, ma'am.
Just a suggestion in terms of next steps, I would recommend that the committee recommends us presenting this list of recommendations to the city council meeting next Tuesday.
And I still want to have a public safety meeting, I think it's May 2nd.
Yes, sir.
The regular public safety committee meeting. We have a lot of work to do.
Yes, sir.
Do you need a vote from us to present?
A
Okay.
recommendation to present the recommendations from today to the council at Tuesday. So we are,
So I'll make that motion that we present these recommendations to full council.
Okay, but the recommendations are, first of all,
We need a second? before
Second.
Okay. Now discussion, go ahead.
and I was going to say, I think the first one we want is an ordinance that requires a permit for gatherings greater than, and how many do we want to say? I'd say 25 or 30, which,
And the chief said 30.
30?
Either one's fine with me, 25 or 30.
Well, 30 is very generous.
I'd like to keep it open for council to decide the number.
Well, let's go ahead and put a number in, get the proposed ordinance during discussion, they can change it.
That's fine.
Okay.
That's what you want to do.
So let's start with the ordinance. Are there any other, that we consider the EMT training? Do we need that, or is that just a procedural thing that you'll deal with it?
I would
internally?
recommend that we present the list that Chief Cornett shared with you all this morning, present
Okay.
them all to City Council, and we can get direction from the full body at that time about
Okay.
what items need to be included in the budget. If, are there any that are short-term and long-term? The ordinance to limit gatherings on the beach and any public property is being developed now. So my goal is to present that for first reading on Tuesday. Because we have an event coming up in early May, it would be our goal to have that in place before then. So we may need to call a special meeting of council to adopt that before that date. But first reading, my request is that's considered at the Tuesday meeting. So we'll be prepared for that.
Okay, I think the motion covers all of these things you mentioned.
Yes.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any against? Motion passes. I don't think there's any further business. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
I'll first at 10:41.
You got I know it's still tax season.
Yeah, it is, very much so.